states and local jurisdictions to comply with these federal laws, including 8 U.S.C. Section 1373. Moreover, the Department of Justice will require that jurisdictions seeking or applying for Department of Justice grants to certify compliance with 1373 as a condition of receiving those awards.
Days after the stinging failure to repeal and replace Obamacare and amidst growing controversy over Trump ties to Russia, Attorney General Jeff Sessions launched a fresh assault on so-called sanctuary cities, threatening federal funding to jurisdictions who refuse to cooperate with immigration law.
Our nation is less safe. Failure to deport aliens who are convicted of criminal offenses puts whole communities at risk, especially immigrant communities in the very sanctuary jurisdictions that seek to protect the perpetrators. DUIs, assaults, burglaries, drug crimes, gang rapes, crimes against children, and murderers.
However, analysts note the move is likely unconstitutional, contradicts studies that show cities with sanctuary policies have lower crime rates, and studies that show undocumented immigrants are less likely to commit crimes than native-born citizens. Sessions was met with promises of resistance from elected officials across the country.
Well, my reaction when I first heard that Mr. Sessions had threatened all sanctuary cities, it didn't come to a big surprise, but I was a little frustrated, I'll be honest with you, because I don't think it really has much teeth. I think what it is more of a political statement. Here you have an administration who tweets constantly about voter fraud, about wiretapping, and they never have their facts behind them. And here they're saying that they're going to go after sanctuary cities. Why? When the definition of a sanctuary city is so different from city to city. The question is, there's laws in place, and either if you break those laws, then I can see you going after a city. But if a city hasn't broken those laws, then what are you worried about? There's no issue there.
Sal Tinajero, a Santa Ana City, California council member, was among those who vowed to take the Trump administration to court.
So we're going to file a lawsuit, and we're going to have to settle this in court, because the reality is, how do you take money away that Congress has already voted to allocate? You can't. Congress has to take another vote.
Meanwhile, ICE shot a documented immigrant in a raid in Chicago. Hundreds have been detained and deported during the first 2 months of the Trump administration. However, President Obama deported a record number of undocumented immigrants. The Real News recently interviewed eminent historian Gerald Horne about how Trump's latest attacks are the latest in a long history aimed at demonizing immigrants with the ultimate goal of keeping their labor cheap.
In my class just a few weeks ago, I was able to get from YouTube the scenes from the Martin Scorsese film Gangs of New York, which presents a terrifying depiction of those so-called draft riots in Manhattan in 1863. And certainly those riots were designed to split the laboring population of Manhattan. And in a like manner, sadly enough, when speaking to Congress just a few weeks ago, the U.S. President Donald J. Trump was seeking to accomplish a similar purpose when he raised the unfortunate and tragic shooting of the black youth in Los Angeles, Jamil Shaw, supposedly and allegedly and purportedly killed by an undocumented Latino immigrant worker.
Jamil's 17-year-old son was viciously murdered by an illegal immigrant gang member who had just been released from prison.
And it was clear that the purpose of Mr. Trump raising this before a national and indeed an international audience was to divide the working class on a black-brown axis.
And in a recent interview of The Real Baltimore, we explored how sanctuary cities can be a front line to the resistance against Donald Trump.
Welcome to The Real Baltimore. I'm your host, Kim Brown. Today we look at how cities and counties across the country are planning to defy President-elect Donald Trump's campaign promise to immediately deport millions of undocumented immigrants following an Obama administration that carried out a record number of deportations.
What we are going to do is get the people that are criminal and have criminal records, gang members, drug dealers. We have a lot of these people, probably 2 million, it could even be 3 million. We're getting them out of our country or we're going to incarcerate.
And Trump has also promised to cut federal aid to sanctuary cities, jurisdictions that have policies that range from simply welcoming immigrants to refusing to cooperate with federal immigration authorities. And in a moment, we'll be joined by a panel of experts in our studio. But first, our reporter Jessel Noor takes a look at what sanctuary cities are.
Block funding for sanctuary cities. We block the funding. No more funding.
Despite his threats to cut their federal funding, Donald Trump's election has prompted major cities from New York to California to declare they will oppose him.
To be clear about what Chicago is, it always will be a sanctuary city.
The sanctuary movement has its roots in the 1980s, with churches offering shelter to Latin American refugees fleeing the slaughter left in the wake of U.S.-backed death squads there. Today, hundreds of cities and counties around the country offer some type of sanctuary policy, which varies greatly by jurisdiction. But the term itself can be misleading.
I mean, from the right, use of the term suggests that undocumented immigrants congregating in these cities and just are able to commit all sorts of crimes, and basically the cities are law enforcement free zones, which is certainly not the case.
Because there's only about 5,000 federal immigration officers nationwide, authorities rely heavily on local authorities to help with deportations. Some of the strongest sanctuary policies exist in cities like Chicago and the encompassing Cook County, which prevents local authorities from asking for immigration status, prevents the sharing of immigration status with federal authorities, and refuses to hold immigrants without a warrant. Courts have ruled these policies, known as ICE detainers, are unconstitutional and violate the Fourth Amendment. On Monday, the nation's capital joined cities like Chicago, New York, and L.A. by offering legal representation to undocumented immigrants facing deportation, something not guaranteed in immigration courts like it is under normal legal proceedings. Last year, grassroots groups and the ACLU helped defeat a measure aimed at banning funding for sanctuary cities in Florida.
The bill was ultimately defeated, and we think that there's some real lessons here for folks in other states to learn as well. And that is, speak to law enforcement. The Florida Sheriff's Association opposes ICE detainers. Even the Department of Homeland Security has acknowledged that there are serious constitutional issues with these unconstitutional holds. So when law enforcement is deciding how to allocate resources, they should be putting a priority on things that work and public safety.
And as far as Trump's threats to cut funding to sanctuary cities, that would be likely challenged in court, experts tell us.
I think we'll inevitably end up in litigation. There's a lot of legal constraints on what the federal government can and can't do to pressure states and localities to do what they want. And it's really important to understand sanctuary cities are not illegal policies. They're not in defiance of federal law. They're, in fact, fully in line with our federal system that says that states and localities get to govern their own local priorities and resources. Although the federal government can offer incentives to localities to do what they want, they can't coerce. I think it'll be a long time before we have a clear answer to this question because there's a lot to sort out, and the Trump administration can't do everything that it says it's going to do.
Well, we're now joined by our two guests in the studio. Elizabeth Alex is the regional director for CASA Baltimore, which is a leading immigrants' rights organization. And we're also joined with Mark Rodriguez. He's a longtime immigrants' rights activist. He currently serves as special assistant to Annapolis Alderman Jerry.
For more, go to therealnews.com. This is Jessel Noor.